All right, welcome back, people. I want to start this new playlist, basically just rambling about web dev stuff on the weekends, sharing some knowledge in the process. Everyone knows I'm a Nuxt dev, so most of this content will be around Nuxt. Let me take this headphone off. All right, cool. So Nuxt, nice framework. I recently found out about this VS Code extension. Let me see if I can find it. Yes, this VS Code extension, Nuxt VSCode. It's pretty cool. What it allows us to do is to use the command palette to basically use the Nuxt CLI. Nuxt is this thing. Where is it? Commands. Yeah, Nuxt is this thing. So you can run npx Nuxt, add, and then you can add like a page, a component, a composable, a layout, all that good stuff. But this is from the command line. Now this thing allows us to add it from the command palette in VS Code. So you press Control Shift and P on Windows, Command, I think Option P on Mac. No, Command Shift P on Mac, and you get this thing. You can type in Nuxt and you get all of these commands. Of course, the reason why I love this is this thing. If you have the folders, you can right click on the component folder, and then you get the option to add a component, and then you can enter the component name. You can do the same thing for composables, layouts, middlewares, plugins, and pages, and this thing like a API endpoint. So pretty cool. I think you guys should definitely check out this VS Code extension. Another thing I want to show is the update from VS Code profiles. So VS Code introduced profiles. Let me just start a new project. So let's just call this Ramble 1. Wait, why did I do that? Right click, open the code. Of course, it opened on the wrong side. Bring it over here. All right, cool. So VS Code introduced profiles. Now, currently you have a default profile, and this is your default VS Code settings. But if you create a new profile, you can add extensions and themes specific to that profile. So my Nuxt 3 profile that I created here, you can see I don't have as many extensions on the side, and these are the extensions that I think will help me with Nuxt 3 development. So auto close tag, auto import, auto rename tag, the HTML CSS support, Iconify. This is a really good plugin from Anthony Fu. The IntelliSense for CSS. So if you're working with like Vuetify, the class names won't automatically populate when you start typing inside of the class attribute in HTML or in Vue files. So this actually cache the CSS names, and you can actually get them like this and just select the one you want from the list. Very cool. Material theme icons. I like these. I like this theme, Monakai++. And this is the Nuxt, what do you call it? The Nuxt VS Code extension that I was talking about earlier. Pretty, of course, TailwindCSS, because I use Tailwind for a lot of things. And these two Vue specific extensions. This one is recommended by the Nuxt team when you're creating a project. They actually recommend that you use this thing. The snippets just help you to scaffold things quickly. So you type in VBase and you get the structure of a Vue single file component. Very cool. No, we don't want to see recommended stuff. All right, cool. So let's just start a project. How do you start a project? npx Nuxt init dot. I want to start the project in this folder. That should be quick. This should take a minute. npm install. All right, so everything is installed. We have our app.vue file. I know we're going to use Tailwind, so let me just jump to the Tailwind website and get that installed. Of course, we can use the module, but I'm just going to use this. So Tailwind, go to the Nuxt tree tab, install these things. 1, 2. Go back to the website. We need to add post CSS to our Nuxt config. So Nuxt config in 1x. We need to add the content to the Tailwind config. So Tailwind config, replace this content. We're not importing anything from the Nuxt config file, so we can remove this. No Tailwind will be used in the Nuxt config file. All right, cool. Next, what do we want to do next? Next, they say that we should create this file. So create a CSS file and add the Tailwind directives to it. And that's Tailwind at Tailwind base, components and utilities. Paste that in, save that. Next, add the CSS file to our Nuxt config, or the path to the CSS file in our Nuxt config. We'll come here, save. Nuxt also recommends that you follow this configuration when you're starting a new project. So you should have Node installed. Cool. They recommend Visual Studio Code and Volar extension. I already have this installed, and they're saying that we should enable takeover mode. This is the recommended way. We can also use the TypeScript view plugin. This isn't the recommended way, so let's look at what takeover mode is. Takeover mode is just disabling the built-in TypeScript thing from VS Code. So how do we do that? Control-Shift-P, type in built in, and select this one, extension, show built-in extensions, and type in TypeScript. And we want to disable this one. So we disable this in this workspace, reload. That's cool. And now we want to say that in our Nuxt config, disable the shim generation. So set this to false. Save. This is also in the Nuxt documentation right below this. So if you have enabled takeover mode or installed the TypeScript view plugin, you can disable generating the shim for .view files in your Nuxt config. And this is how you do it, which we just did. So we have a new project and we can start developing. Let me close this thing. Close this thing. Do we need this? No, we don't need anything else from this. Close that. Boom. What else? I want to install the Nuxt icon module. I usually use that in all my projects. So npm i-d nuxt-icon, and just add it to the modules array. So Nuxt icon, save. Oh, can clear this, minimize this thing. Oh, this is probably a little bit small. Let me enlarge it. Yeah, that should be good. All right, cool. So now we have a app.view file, and what do we want to do here? We want to, what am I doing in this video? I'm going to, what's something that someone requested? Probably authentication. Yeah, let's do authentication. So we're gonna connect to MySQL. MySQL? No. We're gonna use Sequelize. Yeah, let's use Sequelize. So this is not going to be front-end focused. So let's go server. For those of us who don't know what Sequelize is, let me just pull up the page. Sequelize. So Sequelize is a modern TypeScript and Node.js ORM for Oracle, Postgres, other SQL databases, featuring solid transaction support, relations, eagerly and lazy loading, read replication, and more. All right, so Sequelize is an ORM that allows us to communicate with SQL databases from your node-based applications. In our case, we're going to create a Nitro plugin, connect to the database, and then use that Sequelize instance around our application and read and write stuff to the database. I'm not going to actually use a MySQL database in this example. I'm just going to use a SQLite file. That way, once you pull down the repository, I do plan on hosting this repository on GitHub. So once you pull it down, you can actually install and click around and try to make things work. I might use Faker since I'm not going to do so much front-end stuff. Probably should even create a template out of this thing because most of my projects are like this with Tailwind and a Nuxt setup. Yeah, probably shouldn't be doing this all the time, but yeah, that's for some other time. Let's see. What do they say? So do we follow this or do we go to the docs? Let's get started. So getting started on the docs, we install Sequelize. Let's jump back to this, install Sequelize, 1x. Install the driver for the database of choice. So if you're using Postgres, of course, you go with this thing, MySQL, MariaDB. This is the one that we're going to use. SQLite can run on most systems. Tedious if you're going to use MS SQL, and Oracle DB if you're going to use our Oracle database. So let me just copy this again, paste it in. See if we have any errors. No errors. All right, good. So SQLite, Sequelize installed. How do we initialize Sequelize? Connecting to a database. So this is how you connect to a database. Can we see this? Can we read this? I think this is better. To connect to the database, create a Sequelize instance. So this can be done by either passing the connection parameters separately to the Sequelize constructor or by passing a single connection URL. So you can do it like this, or SQLite, or you can do it like this. I prefer this. I think this is easier to follow. Now, go back to VS Code. We're going to create a server folder, right? In server, we're going to create a plugins folder, and then we're going to say db.ts, because this is going to be a Nitro plugin. So we're going to do export default define Nitro plugin, and of course it's going to be an asynchronous function that gives us the Nitro instance. Make this into a function. If you hover over this thing, it should give you the type Nitro app. So Nitro app, Nitro dots, and you can get all of these things. Cool. Now, what are we going to do in this thing? Here we will initialize Sequelize. So let's go here. They're saying that we should bring Sequelize in like this. Of course, we're using Nuxt, so we can't use CommonJS syntax. This cons whatever require kind of that. We have to do import. So import, and we go Sequelize. And what do we want from Sequelize? I think we want Sequelize. Yes, we want this from Sequelize. So we're gonna say, oh no, wait, I'm doing this wrong. The Nitro plugin should actually connect to the database, but the Sequelize instance should be made available throughout the entire application on the server side. So what we want to do is we want to create a utils folder. And then inside this utils folder, we're going to create a file that provides the Sequelize instance. So we can say db.instance okay, instance.ts. Here we're going to import Sequelize, yeah, and then we want to export const Sequelize, yeah, And this is where we define our Sequelize instance. So it's gonna be, let me see, equal to a new listing. So new Sequelize, and this is where we pass in our parameters. Now, in a real application, you'd actually store some of these things in environment variables. Yeah. And in order to access environment variables, we wouldn't be able to just do it like this in the open. We probably would need to create a function. So it'll be something like export use Sequelize. Is that how you spell it? Something like that. And it'll be equal to an asynchronous function. Ooh, yeah. Let's see. It wouldn't take in anything. This would have to be cons. And then we could say something like cons config equal to use runtime config. And then from this config, we'd actually get our env variables. Of course, you'd have to create that .env file here. Add something like db name or path. And then now you would add this to the runtime config object inside of your Nuxt config. So on the server, we'd have db name. So stuff defined right here are available to the server, not the client, and stuff defined inside public, this is actually available to server and client. But we don't want our database name and credentials available to the client, so we just put it here, and then we say process.env.dbname. Yeah. And then now let's run the post install. Let me see. Here it is. Error first. Run the post install command. So that's Nuxt prepare. This will generate the different types. Cool. And now in our config variable, we can actually get this DB name that we just created. So you'd actually use this and make the connection, and then you could return Sequelize from this function, so that whenever you call use Sequelize anywhere else in your application, it returns this instance. But we're not doing it this way. Let's continue. The dialect that we're using is going to be none other than SQLite. And then the path. Let's see. We go here, storage. Storage. So storage is gonna be my db dot SQLite. SQLite. Save. Now, if I come here, let's run this again to make our Sequelize instance available through the types that are generated. Boom. So we can say something like try. Let's just log this error. We're gonna say await. Oh, that's not how you spell it. Await Sequelize, and you can see it's actually available without us importing it at the top. We're at line 1, and that's because anything that's exported from a file in the utils folder, whether it be in the server directory or the project directory, is actually made globally available. So back to this thing, we can say sequelize.authenticate. Yeah. And this is just going to send a select command to your database to see if we can actually send commands back and forth. So if I should save this and run the app, Oh, Tailwind warning. Tailwind warning. This is saying that we don't have anything in our files. Let me just shut it up. So class text, we're gonna say slate 900 bg white. Oh, save that. Now Tailwind can shut up. But if we pay attention to our folder, we can see we have a mydb.sqlite file. VS Code is telling me to search for something to open this file. Let me just install it. I don't know about this thing. Current users, the many of the most commonly used database, blah, 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 blah. I'm not familiar with this one. I'm familiar with this one. Is it this one or the viewer? I think it's the viewer that I'm familiar with. So you click on a file, you see the tables. This is the one I'm familiar with. So let me install this one. All right, good. So go back to the folder, click on this thing. No, not web. And we have our database. So this is essentially our database that we just created here. You can see in the terminal, it sent the request to authenticate. So it's in select 1+1 as result, query to the database, and this is just what they do to say, hey, we're in, we're good, don't worry. All right, cool. So we have that in. We have our Sequelize instance available everywhere. I think now we can start creating models. And models are essentially just, let me see, what's the definition here? Models are the essence of Sequelize. A model is an abstraction that represents a table in a database. So yeah, a model is a blueprint of your table. Let me just go here and we can create a folder for them. So models, and our first model is going to be a user model. And this dot model part is not necessary. I just do it so I know I'm working with a model versus a service file, etc. What matters is this, the .ts at the end. So user.model.ts. How do we define a model? Let me just close the server for now and go back to the docs. We have two ways of defining models. We can use this way, where we call Sequelize, the Sequelize instance that we created, and then define the table name, and then define the properties or the columns in that table. So this would be a table called user with two columns that we made manually. By default, Sequelize will actually add 3 extra columns to your table. They'll add an ID column, that's a primary key. They'll add the created at and updated columns as well. So let's just check this out. The Sequelize define, this is the syntax, and extending the model is also another way of doing it. I think we should use this syntax, but like I said, it's basically the same thing. We can use this if we want to use classes. The advantage of using classes is you actually get to define, you can define static methods under classes. So let's say you're going to have a function that returns the user's full name. You can actually create a static class or an instance method, sorry, not class, instance method on this class and call it for each user that is created. I think there's an example of it in the documentation, but it's somewhere in the documentation. I can't find it right now, sadly. But the docs, very good. You can go through the docs on your own timing and see what they have to offer. These are the data types. So each column can be of one of these data types. Let's see, column options. Taking advantage of models being classes. So here you can see they have this class and they have a static method on the class. So you can say user.class level method, and once you call this, it will return this value. This is an instant method, right? So if you create a new user, see they did it down here. You create a new user and you can call user. You create a new user like this. Then you can call user.get full name, and this will be returned. So this is the advantage of using the init method over the Sequelize defined. I think we should use this one just in case we have something that we want to some classes that we want, some methods that we want to create on the class. So let's jump back into this thing. Imports from Sequelize. We want data type, and I don't know what else. Let me see. So it's export class. Oh, we want model. Model, yeah. Export class user model should extend model, and then we can say user model init, right? And then we can define our different what do you call it, different columns in the user table. So first column, first name, and inside of this is where we can actually define the type and different properties for this single column. So the type is going to be data types dot string, and for strings we can give it a length. By default it's 255, I think. Yeah, default length is 255. Let's say your name shouldn't be longer than 50 characters, first name at least. Notice it's giving us an error. What is it saying? Expected 2 arguments but got 1. The second argument that it's expecting is actually that Sequelize object. So this is actually available globally thanks to this utility instance, this utility db.instance right here. So we can say Sequelize is equal to Sequelize, or we can do it like this. This is the same thing as doing this. Next thing, we can set the timestamps to true. I think it's true by default. Yes, it is. Another thing that we can do is set the table name. So our table name is going to be users. Let's save that. And we want to say allow null is false because you have to have a first name if you're a user. We can do validation as well. And these are the different validation rules that we can actually apply to this column. I'm not going to use any of them. Can use the min value. Is it min value? Length. Yeah. So we can say length between 1 and 50. So whenever we're creating a user, if the first name is not between 1 and 50, then we'll get an error. Let me save that. Let's see what else. Let me just double check to ensure that that is how the length validation actually works. Length only allow values with length between 2 and 10. Okay, yeah, that's how it works. Cool. Wasn't there another one? No. Okay. Not empty. We could apply this one as well. But you get what it is. You can go to the validation docs and just go through the different validations down here and pick the one that works for the column that you're creating. Next, we have a last name. The last name, gonna be the same thing. Email, I guess we can go email. Email, I think there's an is email validation. Yes. So this is database level. Well, not database, because this can't be enforced on the database level. ORM level, I guess is the term, or phrase. You can, once you try to create a user using this model, if the email field is not an actual email, then you'll get an error. All right, cool. Enough of this. Let's see, how do I use this? So we can go back to the model instance. So after defining your model, right, we can create an instance. So we can say model name.build. This just builds the instance of the model. It doesn't actually save it. Then you can call save to save it to the database. I prefer using create because it combines build and save. Login instance. Of course, you can enable and disable login. It's enabled by default, but when you create the Sequelize instance, you can actually set login to false if you don't want to print anything in the console. Because whenever Sequelize sends a request or a query to the database, it gets logged, and you'll see that in action. Let me just comment that out for now. It's not running, but so what do we want to do now? We're going to create an API endpoint. So server API folder, I'm going to say users and index.get.ts. The .get is just telling Nux that this is a get endpoint. Anything else coming to this endpoint should be denied. So let's build this endpoint out. The first thing that we want to do is import our user model. Let me see, user model. Let's import that. I don't like importing stuff like this. Yeah, so we go back one directory and then we go up, and then to models, and then to, yeah, good. All right, cool. Then we export default defined event handler. Yeah, this is going to be asynchronous, and we get the event as the first argument, and this should be an R function. So now what we want to do is, in this get event or get endpoint, is find all of the users in the database, return them. Yeah, so we're going to say, what are we going to say here? We're going to say const users equal to await user model find all. You see we get auto completion. Cool. And if we want to pass in different constraints, we can actually do things like limits, we can order, we can say where, and all of that good stuff. But let me just save this, and then we're gonna return users. Yeah, so we're gonna test this endpoint, and I'm not gonna use a different application. I'm just gonna use can use a few things. We can use Thunder Client. This way we can send requests to our API endpoint. We can use other stuff like REST client, I think it's called. Yeah, REST client. But with this one, you have to actually create a file. I don't want to create a file. So Thunder Client it is. Start on the client. And we get our little lightning bolt down here. So close this. Let me close all of these files. Thunder Client. Oh, I have some cached requests. So we're going to do a new request. It's going to be to HTTP localhost 3000 API/users. Yeah. And then let's see. We don't need to send anything else. You can save that. And then let's start the application npm run dev. I think we're up. And then if I hit send, ooh, get an error. No such table called users. Why are we getting this error? Let me check. All right, so I think we're getting this error because we did not sync when we created the database instance here. So let's do that. Sequelize.sync. Let me see. No users table created. All right, sync. The sync function, it accepts a few parameters in an object. The two that are mainly used, the alter. So when you set this to true, what it will do is it will check all the models and then create the table and update the ones that exist. So if the table doesn't exist, then it will create the table. If it does exist, then it will just check to ensure that all the columns are up to date with your model definition. Yeah. The force option should not be used unless you're in development. What this will do is, if you set this to true, it will destroy the database essentially and recreate it. So it will drop everything. Like it says here, if force is true, each DAO will do drop table if it exists before it tries to create its own table. So if you have information in the database, this setting force to true will destroy everything and then recreate the database essentially. I probably should set this to true. Let me set this to true, run the app again. Yep. So you can see all of the logs here where it dropped the user table, whether it existed or not, and then it recreated it. Cool. So now if we check this, we can see our users table here. Yeah. I think this thing is added by SQLite. Usually the other drivers don't add. Well, I know MySQL doesn't add something like this, but Sequelize does apparently. But this is our user table. Yeah. If we go back to Thunder client, send this request again, we get back an empty array because we have no users in our database. And you can see here where it actually sent and logged the request. So select ID, first name, last name, email, created that, updated that from users as user model. Let's create an endpoint that will actually create a user. I want to close this. Let's close that. So we go back to API users and we want to say, wait, where's the duplicate function? I don't have that extension. Duplicate, install. Nice. So now we right click this thing and duplicate it. So it's going to be create dot host dot ts. Yeah. So this endpoint is going to create a user like the name suggests. So here we'll have to get some information from the person sending the request. And to do that, I think we have a utility from H3 called readBody. Const body equal readBody. And you have to pass in the event. Yeah. Now let's just log body to ensure that, oh wait, body, we're actually doing the right thing. So new request. Let me go to this old one. Nope, that's not it. Where is it? Oh, this one. And we're gonna say users da 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 da. I think we have to put the create on the end of this. What's a post request? Users slash create. Yeah. Body JSON raw. Let's go. So we want to say first on and last name vehicle email. Oh, can we do that? I don't think so. Okay. Have to do that now. All right, cool. So we save that. Let's send it. Cannot find a route matching API users. Create. Maybe doing this wrong. Let me check the documentation. So we go to guide, the server folder, and then usage. Wait, what? What? I am doing it right. Read body. Yeah, that's right. Params. So this should probably be await. Yeah, we're gonna await that. But it's saying that it can't find this endpoint. That's strange. And again, it's hitting the endpoint though. Hitting the endpoint. The file is called API users create. Probably I need to restart this thing. Let me see. Is it because I didn't return anything? Let's return body. Hit it again. Probably. So it could be because I didn't return anything, or maybe the restart was needed. Let me take that out and see. Yeah, you definitely should return some from the API endpoint. That's the problem. There we go. So we're getting back this from our API. So let's store this now in the database. Yeah. So let's see. We're gonna say create user const user equal to await user model dot create, and I think we can pass in body as is. Yeah. And then we're gonna return the user. So now if we do this request, the user is created. We get by the ID and the params that we sent, the date that it was created and updated. And then if we send this request as well, this user is actually a part of the list of all the users. Now, of course, in a real application, I'd bring in something like joy. Let me just disable the destruction of the database. So let's take this force off. I'll probably install something like joy. And then in my utils folder, create a helper file. Yes. And export a few joy from joy. Yeah. Export a few schemas from Joy. So I think it would be something like a user schema equal to Joy dot object. Yeah. And inside Joy.object, you can define the fields that you should get and the constraint surrounding the fields. So for a user, we want the first name, first name, and this should be a string. The max should be 50 characters. That the min should be 1 character required, and it's similar for the last name, so we'll just copy that down. And we want something similar for email. Yeah, draw that string. We don't need all of this. We can say .email, save, and this function will become available to us on the server side once we run the application again. If we don't want to run the application and we want to get this schema, we can just run the Nuxt prepare command. Right, everything is generated. And then now in our create, we can say, before we create, validate, right? So const, this object is going to be equal to user schema dot validate async. I think, let me see. Either one works. So we're going to validate the body and we're going to abort the request early if we find one field that has an error. So let's set this to true. And we're going to say allow unknown. Allow unknown just allows you to send other properties inside of the validation object other than what is defined in this schema. So outside of first name, last name, and email, you can send other properties. Let's see what we get back. I think we get back an error, we get back the value, and we get back a warning. So I'm just interested in the error right now. Now we're gonna say, is this asynchronous? No, it's synchronous. Okay, good. No promise. So if we get an error, send it back. So we're gonna say if we're going to throw create error, I think that's what it's called. Yep. And create error accepts an object, and the message is gonna be the error message from Joy, and it's gonna be the message. Yeah, so let's save that. Now if we run our app, all right, cool. If we run our app and we try to create something without, let's say, a first name, so if we send this, we get back this error message, and the message says first name is not allowed to be empty. This is coming from Joy. Cool. If we remove one of the properties completely and try to send it, we're getting back the same error message because we did not fill this back in. So let's send this again. This email is required. Yep. So that's a bit of validation. Let me format this. So now we need database validation. If we try to create this record again, it will be created because there's no unique constraint on the email or the user's first name or last name. So what we want to do is check if user exists, right? So we can say const user exists is equal to await user model dot find one. We want to find one where the email of that user is equal to the email that is sent in the body. Now, if the user exists already with this email, we want to say sorry, this email is taken. So let me save that and try to send this request again. Remember, we already have a user with this email. Yeah. So if we send it again, we should get, sorry, this email is taken. Now add one to this, send it. Nice. New user created with a slightly different email. Yeah. All right, good. So now let's see. We can do all sorts of things with this following the same pattern. We can create a put endpoint, a delete endpoint. It will be more or less the same thing. For authentication, how would I tackle authentication? Usually in Express, you would create a middleware that check if the user is defined or there's a token coming over. There would be a login or a register endpoint. Let me see. How do we approach this here? We can approach this by creating the authentication endpoint. So in API, we can say auth, let's say login dot post ts. Yeah. And here we want to say something like, what do we want to say here? We need the user model. Let's just import that. Yeah. Again, remove that. We also want to export a default define event handler function. It's going to be asynchronous. We're going to do async stuff inside of it. Okay, so when you're logging in, the first thing you want to do is find the user. This is not a real application, so no password will be sent or stored. We're just going to search by email. Cool. So find the user. We're going to say const user is equal to await user model find one where the user's email is equal to body.email. Yeah. So we're logging in with email. We don't have body yet, so let's just create a body. Const body equal to await read body, and we pass in the event. Yeah. All right, cool. So if this person does not exist, we send back the error message. So error if user does not exist. So if not user, throw a new error, create error. There it is. And we're gonna say user not found. Yeah, that's the first step. Check to see if the user is back, is actually there. Well, no, this should be the second step. The first step is actually validation. So I want to ensure that the user is actually sending us the parameters that are required to log in. So in our helper here, we can actually create and export a login schema. Usually you'd have email and password in this, but for this scenario, we just have email, right? So save that. And we can say const error is equal to login schema validate And we're not getting the type-ins because we need to run this again. There we go. Screen out. So validate. We pass in the body and born early, true, allow unknown, true. So save that. And just like here, if we get an error, we just send it back. Yeah. Instead of copy and pasting this all over the place, we can actually put this in a helper function, and we just pass the error to the helper function, and we have one function that's responsible for sending back errors to our client rather than having this code copy and pasted all over the place. But that's for another video. All right, so let's save that. So first we validate. If everything is good, we try to find the user. If we can't find the user, send back an error message. But if we do find the user, we actually should set that user in the cookie and send that cookie back to the client so that they can actually stay logged in. So what next? We should say if we have the user, what do we do? We're gonna create a cookie. Create cookie. Now let me just jump back to the docs to see how we handle this type of thing. Is there something down here? Nope. Storage. Just in, I think it's in API. I think it's a composable use cookie. Server side. So set cookie. This is how you do it. So you call on the set cookie composable. It needs the event, and then it needs the name of the cookie. Sorry. So the name of the cookie is gonna be, let's see, let's call this Ramble user. And then the value should be a string. This value is gonna be, let me see, can actually stringify the user's email and ID. Do I want to do that? No, let's not do that. Let's just set the user's email as the value. So user dot, wait. Why am I not getting the email property? I think this should be available. Yeah, I think it should be available. Let me check the Sequelize docs. So querying Jane find, we should be able to say user dot and get properties from the user. Yeah. I think this is just a TypeScript thing. So next we want to set the cookie options. So usually I set the max age, and this is the number that we set to tell the cookie when to expire or not be valid anymore. Usually I'd set this to, this is seconds, right? Specify the number in seconds. Yes. All right, cool. So 60 seconds, that's 1 minute multiplied by 60 again. That's 1 hour multiplied by 24 hours, that's a day, multiplied by 7. So let's say 7 days. Let's save that. So when we set the cookie, we give it the event. This is the name of the cookie, Ramble user cookie. This is the value, right? Because it's event name value. Serialization options. Serialized options are cool. So what next? After this, we can just return the user. Yeah, and just return the user. So let me just send a request to this Auth login endpoint. So let's make a new request. And we want it to go to localhost 3000/API/auth/login. This is going to be a post request. We're going to send the empty body first. See what we get back. Email is required. All right, cool. So now we're going to test this with an email that does not exist. Save that. Send it. User not found. Good. Now if we remove it, send the proper stuff, we get back our user. And if we look in the cookies, we have this cookie. Yeah. Now we can actually set this cookie to be an HTTP only cookie so that the client can't read it with JavaScript. It's only accessible via the server. So HTTP only, true, hit save. So now if I send the request again, let's see the response. Response is good. And this is now an HTTP only cookie. All right, good. So authentication. I was saying earlier that usually in an Express app, you'd set up a middleware to pull the user from each request if the token exists. So I think what I can do is create a middleware folder here and call it auth.ts. And let me see, how do we do middlewares again? So we go guide, server, middleware. So it's gonna be this. Oh, it's event handler function. Okay, cool. So paste this in. Nope, we're not gonna do it like this. We're gonna say we're gonna get the cookie. So get the cookie. Once cookie equal to get. No, it's not get cookie. API use cookie server. Yeah, it's get cookie. So this, I'm gonna say cookie is equal to get cookie, and the name of our cookie is this thing. Again, you don't want to put this in a string. You want to make this a variable so that you can update it one place. You don't want to type and actually make a mistake with this thing. So it's actually best to probably put it in helper. Let me just do it. Export and cookie name. Oh. So now instead of having this thing here, we can say cookie name. Yeah. And instead of passing this string here, we can say cookie name. Now this is not available again because we have to run the prepare command. Ooh, we're having errors. Okay, let's kill the server. Run this again. Ah, good. Now we get the string. All right, cool. So we're gonna get this thing. If the cookie exists, then we want to say, let me see, what did they do here? No, that's not it. Yeah. Where is it? Who's cookie? What? Refresh that. That's weird. All right, so server. Let's go the middleware. Yeah, this is where it was. So we can actually attach an object with the user to the context. So the event context, we're gonna take it and we're gonna say if the cookie exists, then we're gonna, oh, let's find the user first. Find the user. So we're gonna say const user is equal to user model dot find one where email is equal to cookie. Remember that we're storing the email on the cookie. So we're gonna say, let's just log this user. Is it anywhere? Oh wait, we won't get it until we send a request. So let me see. So send. Oh, and it's pending. We have to do a wait. But this is not a sync. No, that should work. All right, cool. So let's send the request to Auth. So middleware is actually run every time you send a request to the server. So let's send this and we can see that we have our user object here. Good. So now it sent this to the database. Select these fields from users where the email is equal to the email that's in the cookie. Yep. Now, if we have that this user, so we're gonna say if user, then we want to attach this user to the event context. Context.user is equal to user, right? I think that they did this like this. I'm not sure if I have to follow this, but I'm just gonna go with the docs. Hit save. And you may be wondering, why am I using so many if statements? That's because you can't return anything from a middleware. The middleware shouldn't stop the request or, return anything from the request. It really should just read and manipulate the event, but it shouldn't block anything. Yeah. So now that we have the the user attached to the context here, I think we can actually pull it in this file. So let me see if I can log event context. Am I logging anything here? No, good. All right, so let's send a request there and you can see where we have this user on the event context. Yeah. And that is because we actually have this cookie available. Now, if I clear this, so it removed all the cookies. I guess this is stale. Let me open it back. Cookie gone. Good. Now, if I say log in, you can see that this is the log from our endpoint, and you can see that the nitro is here, but we don't have the user attached. Now that the cookie is available again, we should get the user object attached like it was up here. So let me clear this. How do I clear this thing? Okay, I don't know how to clear the terminal. Send the request again, and you can see that we have a user attached. Cool. So what we can do is we can actually set up our endpoints to check if this user exists. So what we can do is we can create a helper function. Since we don't want to do it in every single file manually, that's going to require authentication. Set up a helper function that check if the user is logged in before we process the rest of the endpoint code. So this is how we log in. Yeah, we log in, set the cookie, get the user. Great. Now let's set up a profile endpoint. So it's gonna be somewhat similar to this. So profile dot post dot ts. Post? No. Get. It should be a get endpoint. Yeah, because we're trying to get our profile information. So what are we doing here? We're gonna say no, we don't need a body. We're not trying to validate anything. We do want to find the user, but before we try to find the user, let's create that helper function that will get the user from the event. So what we're going to do is in this helper right here, we're going to export a function called get or check. We can say check auth or check user, something like that. And it's gonna be a function that takes in an event. We're gonna say this is of type h3 event, and it's gonna return something. It's gonna return true or false, right? So we're gonna say return event dot context dot user. Yeah. So let's put this here just in case the context does not exist. And we can actually wrap this in this Boolean thing. So it's going to return true or false. So if this user exists, it's going to return true. If not, it's going to return false. So let's save that, generate the types again. Okay, close up. Ooh, a lot of logs. This is why I disable login when I'm working with Sequelize. It's good for debugging and it helps you to see what queries are being sent to the database, but it gets real annoying. So let me just disable it. Where do I disable it? Here. So when I create this thing, I'm gonna disable that. No more login. Just restart. So let's see. We have the check user, helper. We have the middleware that's attaching the user to the event object. We have the profile. So here we want to say user auth equal to check user, and we're going to pass in the event. We're going to say if not user auth, then we're going to throw the error message, and that's going to say unauthorized. You can send the status code to be 401 as well. But if we are authorized, then we're going to say find one where the email is equal to events context dot user. I think it's dot user email. This is very long. Let's put some question marks just in case this thing fails. And if we can't find the user, we're going to send this back. Otherwise, we're going to just return the user. We can also leave this here so that every time the user sends a request to get their profile, we actually refresh the cookie that's set. So let's leave this here and return the actual user. So let's go back to REST client. We are currently logged in with this person. And let's create a new request. It's gonna be similar to this one, but it's gonna be profile and it's gonna be a GET request. So if I send a GET request, I get back the user that's logged in. Yeah. So we have this right here, and that's the user that we get back. But if we send this request, let's clear the cookie. Cookie is removed. And then we send the request again. We get a 401 unauthorized because there's no cookie in the request. Cool. So I hope that's clear. Hopefully that helps somebody. I think I'll stop here. All that Tailwind setup in the start was for nothing. Yeah, because this video is purely server side. But with this authentication thing set up, you can add a registration endpoint and create your users from there, doing the necessary validation and checks as well. The profile endpoint to get the user that's logged in, and these should be protected. You don't want anybody just sending a request to create a user. So if you had, like, say, an admin dashboard, you could allow admins to create and regular staff members to just view with this endpoint, that type of thing. But like I said, guys, just to recap, Sequelize, very good ORM. If you are working with a node backend, like we're working with here, well, this is not node, this is H3, yeah. But it's built on node. You can use it to communicate with your SQL database. Definitely check out the plugin, the extension. I didn't get to use it because we didn't go client side in this application, but very cool extension. Where is it? This one. It's unofficial for now. Hopefully it gets added to the Nuxt doc soon. But it's very, very handy. Comes in very handy. You can just press the Control-Shift-P, type in Nuxt, and you get the different commands. Yeah. So you want to add a plugin. What's the name of the plugin? Let's say we're adding Viewify as a plugin, and it will add Viewify for you. So if you come here, you have a plugins folder, and then you have this all set up. Yeah. And you can start making your plugin. So that's how it works. But until next time, have a great day, people. Peace.